Imagine you're spending your time thinking about the broader engineering problem and then use those tools to solve complex problems instead of spending your time clicking on a mouse, right?
And how much of AI is actually inside of ToffeeX?
So first of all, the core of ToffeeX is physics-based. So essentially what we have done, we solve the physics and the maths. That's very, very advanced problems, and we can't understand how to do that. This is what I think the next generation of engineers will be. They have stronger fundamentals of maths and physics, more system thinkers.
Okay, Luca, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joseph. Very happy to be here. I've been following a lot your podcasts, and I absolutely love them. So I'm happy to be here today.
Absolutely, yeah. We've been in touch for a while. Today we want to talk about how you transitioned, so to speak, from being a space engineer to the beautiful topic of generative design. But before we jump into that, like, what is maybe your background? We mentioned already space engineer, but how did you actually decide to go from space engineering to now where you're at ToffeeX?
Okay, that's a very good question, good way of starting. So my background, yes, it's indeed space engineering. I did study aerospace first and then space engineering in Italy. And my very first job had to do with computational fluid dynamics and thermal analysis of combustion chambers of smaller rocket engines. And that what I wanted to do is I wanted to be an engineer. My father worked for a company, for an engineering company. They made piston engines. My grandfather worked for Piaggio, the ones that they make the famous motorbike Vespa. So it's kinda in the family, right? But then with time, I kind of moved out from Italy. I went to UK. I started working again, very, very deep tech. I worked in optimization for space trajectories, and that was software development, essentially something that has to do with computer science and with optimization. It's something, it was many years ago. It's something today you would say it has to do with artificial intelligence. At that time, we wouldn't say artificial intelligence. It was just computer science, mathematical modeling, and a bit of data that you would analyze. I did try to spin out my company at that time, many years ago. I didn't have enough business awareness at that time, so I decided to go in roles that were a bit more, let's say, customer facing and business. And I joined a company called at the time Granta Design, which was a spin out of the University of Cambridge. And this is, we're talking about over 10 years ago. And I started let's say I pivoted my career from really a tech guy to more customer facing. So an application engineer, business developer, sales guy. And I went through all the ranking from the very junior up to the more senior, up to management. Then the company got acquired by Ansys. So I had an opportunity to work at Ansys for quite a few years. And also there I had an opportunity to work in different roles up to sales director. And then in 2023, I joined 2024, sorry, I joined ToffeeX. And I'm heading up the commercial side of Toffee alongside our CEO, Marco.
What made you so interested, Luca? Maybe to quickly ask that question in sales and business rather than following the academic path, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think essentially just the low tier research side wasn't enough for me. So I wanted to see real impact. I wanted to do business. For me, that was very important. And that was, I wanted to have my own company at the time as well. And that's probably where we will be heading with time. At the same time, I enjoyed very much like deep technologies. Like I enjoy computational fluid dynamics, software. I enjoy engineering a lot. So I want to stay in this sector. And I always wanted to kind of keep these two parts, let's say a bit the technical part and the business side, which sometimes it looks, I would say, in the past, people were asking me, are you technical or are you business? So yeah, well, I'm both. Okay, so you pick. But I would say now it's more on the business side. But I'm not out of technical depth, let's say, when we talk about technical stuff. I don't have the specialized knowledge that I might have had 15 years ago. But I kind of understand what we're talking about. And that helps a lot in shaping the business side of things or working with customers on many different applications. I would say also the part that was very helpful was to experience a few different things beyond the, say, technical and business side. One was to experience a company like Generative Design was a fantastic company, fantastic people, fantastic technology. And we went from kind of smallish company to a 200 people company that then got acquired by Ansys for quite a large amount of money. So going through an acquisition, I learned a lot of things. Then working for the let's say the top company, I would say in simulation was kind of a blessing. Fantastic people, again, fantastic technology. I learned so many things there. Working for, let's say, corporate America, in high tech corporate America, I learned the American way of doing business, which is probably the best one. And then I went back to, let's say, at the year we're talking about a 2,000 people company, no more at the time, maybe 4,000 people company, 2 billion in revenue when I left. And then I went back to a small company. When I joined Toffee, we had around 10 people, and growing now we are around 30. So I kind of had this opportunity to work at all the different stages of companies in high tech, which is in deep tech, which I found great. The other part, one other reason that I wanted to go into the business side a bit more, I always wanted to work more globally. So I never wanted to work in a specific geography. For instance, I live in Cambridge. Chances are that you might do a lot of stuff in Cambridgeshire or in England. That's something I never wanted. I always wanted to find a way to work on larger geographies, and that was very good. In all my experiences, I always choose roles where I could work with. Essentially, I had an opportunity to work everywhere. I worked a lot in US. I worked with South America. I worked with all the countries in Europe. I worked in Middle East with some African countries. I worked in Japan, South Korea, Australia. And that's something that being on the business side helped me realize that dream, I would say, which is working a bit everywhere.
I'm not sure how the Italian people call it. I'm also not sure where the term comes from. I think it was they call it the universal human, like l'uomo universale, something like this.
Yeah,
I think maybe it was back in the.
That's good.
Yeah, it feels like the engineers have to become more and more like this universal guy who understands the engineering side of things, the business side of things, and then if you merge both together, like you do, Luca, it's basically your unfair advantage ultimately in business because you're an engineer but also a sales guy at the same time.
Yeah,
Really cool.
definitely.
Yeah. I'm wondering what attracted you to actually to Toffee. Is it this startup vibe? Is it more like you wanted to work in a startup? But what was it actually that convinced you to work at Toffee?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. So I didn't know Toffee. When I was at Ansys, I didn't know that Toffee existed. And then I remember that very clearly. In July 2023, Marco Pietropali, which is the CEO and founder of Toffee X, called me, and we had a conversation on the phone. And I was absolutely amazed by what he did. Let's say I didn't know the technology. Explained a bit the Toffee X technology, and I thought it was something remarkable. I knew about generative design and topology optimization. I knew ANSYS, for instance, had structural topology optimization, but we didn't have fluid topology or thermo-fluid topology optimization, which is an incredibly difficult problem to solve. And Marco did it, which I thought it was incredible. I think tons of people have tried to crack that problem and, let's say, have faster thermal-fluid generative design topology optimization, and they didn't manage. So that thing alone, I thought it was incredible. On top of that, my background was kind of CFD, optimization, sales, business. So it sounded like, oh my God, everything is in one place. It's ToffeeX essentially. And then the values of the company, I thought they were very good. So Marco has a very similar family upbringing. We have a very similar, let's say, childhood, and so we found ourselves together really well. Then I met the guys in London. There are a few geniuses in that company. Everyone was absolutely fantastic, and that's essentially what attracted me. I must admit, I was really happy with Ansys. I think it's a fantastic company. I never thought I'm gonna leave, and I actually, when I left, I kept a lot of connections with them. Today we are Ansys technology partners, so kind of the circle is closing a bit. But yeah, I would say two things: the technology, amazing technology. I worked also for a little while within the CTO of Toffee. I worked with one of the main guys of Fluent, so I kind of knew what was going on in that area. And the company itself, the people. Now, moving from a big corporate to a small company, that you have, of course, you got questions, right? You go from something very stable, potentially more stable, to something less stable. But for me, it wasn't really a problem. I think you sometimes you have to take some risks, otherwise you get just too comfortable, and that's not what I've never been comfortable. I don't want to be comfortable. I just prefer to take a little bit of risk and make new things successful, and that's what drove me also to Toffee, and it's going really well. So that was a good thing to do.
Definitely great choice. And maybe in simple terms, Luca, if people do not understand what Toffee actually does, like, I mean, everybody talks about generative design. Is it now AI? Is it not AI? What does Toffee do in very simple terms, in layman terms?
Yeah, so ToffeeX, first of all, it's a software company. We do what is called generative design for thermo-fluid applications. Generative design is essentially in super simple terms. So if anyone is very technical, please forgive the words that I'm going to use, but I'm going to use very, very simple terms. Is essentially the computer that is kind of designing for you. So the computer gives you the final design, or the near to final design, which is kind of a different way of designing products. So the classical way would be, you as an engineer, you design a product, then you analyze the product, then you do a little bit of back and forth between what you have designed and what's called simulation on this product, and then you have a final product, which is most likely not fully optimized. You either run out of time or run out of money. What generative design does, it starts from, let's say in our case, it starts from the physics, and it builds your component very fast. And then this component is something probably your brain wouldn't get to, not because you as an engineer, you're not clever, it's just because the physics behind it is incredibly complex. It's highly nonlinear when it comes to fluids, incredibly complex. You can get to these, let's say, new shapes, and then you use your engineering intuition and your engineering knowledge to modify those shapes, or to make them more manufacturable, for instance, although manufacturing can be considered in ToffeeX. And it gives you a head start. You can, let's say, design much faster, and you can design products that are much more performant. So that's in a nutshell what it is. Now, for ToffeeX specifically, there are a couple of concepts I'm going to throw in there, and I'm sure people, if they are familiar, they know what I'm talking about. If they're not familiar, they can get more information. It's about thermo-fluid topology optimization. That's what we use alongside computational fluid dynamics. The algorithms we use are kind of innovative, and this comes out from the brain of Marco, which is the CEO and founder of ToffeeX. Yeah, that's in a very, very much in a nutshell what we do. Examples of applications, anything that has to do with thermal management. So it can be cooling of batteries, think about cold plates, inverters, think about heat sinks for inverters and for electric cars, cooling of radars, lasers. It can be manifolds, so even if there is no heat exchange, still fluid topology optimization, and many more exotic things like carbon capture. Or we can also do things on the manufacturing side rather than on the design side. For instance, we work a lot on high pressure die casting optimization. So kind of a large variety of things, mainly in the aerospace and automotive sector, but also data centers now, high tech, a few more.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, Luca, how do engineers traditionally approach this, especially when it comes to thermal optimization, fluid optimization, and then in combination as well? How does the classical engineering process look like, and where do you fit in nowadays? And do you disrupt existing tool chains? Do you tightly fit into existing tool chains? So how does it work from an engineering point of view? Not, maybe also relevant for the organizations that watch this podcast who maybe want to adopt ToffeeX as a software.
Yeah, yes. This is something I was touching a little bit upon before. So imagine the classical way of designing things at very high level. Of course, there is much more detail, but at very high level, you have what you call CAD, computational aided design, and CAE, which is computational aided engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And you usually have in a company a bunch of designers that will design products in their CAD systems, and then you will have a bunch of analysts, we call them analysts, or simulation engineers that will simulate the products that you are designing. Now, this process there is a lot of back and forth. So you have great designers that design great things, pass it to these analysts, and then you have this back and forth, CAD, CAE, CAD, CAE, CAD, CAE. And this can take a lot of time. It generally suboptimal, but we have designed fantastic products using this method. So we went, let's say over the years, if you look at 50, 60 years ago, we went from a more manual way of designing things, a lot of trial and error, to something which is more computational through CAD and CAE. And now what we're doing is to go to the next level, which is accelerating this CAD CAE process through generative design. So we give engineers initial shapes they can work on, so they don't have to come up with those shapes from scratch. We give them a head start. And at the same time, we help them find the shapes or the designs that are most optimal. Now, in all this process, essentially, you do two things. You make them do things faster and better. That's the bottom line. Now, is this going to disrupt the workflow? Absolutely not. This is not. We're not going into companies and telling them you're going to change the way you design completely. That's not what we do. What we do is to fit in a larger engineering digital workspace, and we are part of that. So a tool like Toffee is complementary essentially to any CAD, CAE, or AI tool. It's not replacing anything. It's just giving you, it's actually increasing the value of your existing digital stack, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with time, what's going to happen, and what I can see is happening already, we're helping them design more advanced products. They will use more CAD, they will use more CAE. They will be able to take on more product complexity. So they will be able to design products that are more and more complex. And when I use the word complex, it's complex in a positive way, not complex in a negative way. Complex meaning a lot of different physics involved. We will be able to push innovation in a way that wouldn't be possible before. And one thing that I always like to say is, in all this process, the engineer is still at the center. We're not removing the engineer. ToffeeX is not a black box. ToffeeX is a tool the engineers use to become, I would say, super engineers, essentially.
So basically, you see the engineer more as the orchestrator of different tools and extensions they have.
Yes, essentially, yes.
Yeah. You being in sales, Luca, what kind of unique challenges or misconceptions have you encountered when you talk to potential customers, right? Like to prospects, for example. Is there some misconceptions people have about generative design or the way your tool works? Because obviously you have to do objection handling at the end of the day as a salesperson, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of the most common ones that you encounter?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's start from I would say I'm going to start from the fundamentals of this problem. The fundamentals of this problem is when you try to bring something new to the market, you will always have some people that don't want to change. They feel like, I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm not going to change the way I'm going to do that, which is kind of funny because we're working in verticals that are extremely high performing and where you want to have innovation, continuous innovation, right? But I do understand them. I've been in that position as well, right? But you also find people that are very happy to embrace some change, and this change is not so big actually. It's just I would say it's an increment. It's initially an incremental step, and you find quite a few of them. So the first thing is to find in a company who are the people that are happy to try something new. And the reality is, once they try, they get an enormous value out of it. And we found that there are a few people we're working with. They became excellent champions of Toffee X. Now, so I would say fundamentally is whatever it is, generative design, AI, whatever it is, there will be some people that don't wanna change. And even if you show the best metrics, even if you go as rationally as possible, there is always something that doesn't work, and that's okay. It's absolutely okay. There will always be something that doesn't work, right? The engineer solves that. That's the end point. What we're giving them is a head start. So that I would say is one of the first problems to overcome. It's not a problem. It's just I would say it's normal. This is the third time I worked for a university spin-off, and I always went through exactly the same things. So I would say this time I got the best technology in hand. So that's good. It makes things easier. Now the other thing, another couple of things that may be difficult is managing expectations. ToffeeX is a small company. It has 30 people. You cannot compare what you can do with the likes of Siemens or Ansys or Altair or companies that have thousands of engineers working there. So you do need, as an engineer that is trying to use a product, to understand that we cannot do everything. We specialize in something, and that's what we do really well. But then you will have to take the designs out of ToffeeX and use Ansys or use Siemens and validate those designs. And that's okay. I think it's a little bit unreasonable to think that you close your eyes, you press a button, and in 5 minutes you have a design that maybe your company took 30 years to kind of get to, and you think in 30 seconds you're going to have something better. So you do need a little bit of open mind and spend not an enormous amount of time, because honestly you can get things really fast, but you need to spend a little bit in trying to understand what generative design and fluid topology optimization is before pressing that button. And that's important. That's something we try to teach people. But the reality is, without saying names, because I cannot say, but we work with a few companies, and they've got one example in particular that is incredible. They have a product, and again, it has to do with cooling, and I cannot say what it is, but it has to do with cooling. It's a component for cooling a larger system. They have a product that they have designed for many years. It's really good. It's a really great component. With Toffee in 24 hours, they got something better. 24 hours. Okay. After, of course, there is a little bit of training first. There is a little bit of trial and error with Toffee. That's for sure. But imagine that you have designed something with the classical methods for years. You have something great, and in 24 hours, you have something which is better. How good is that? You know, and that makes you think, right? I think at that point it's really hard to say I don't want to use it. It's really, really hard. You really need to kind of be a little bit of a big contrarian. But it's okay. It's okay. Other misconceptions, I would say, we're not CFD2. That's the other thing. A lot of people, you land in an account and they're like, okay, you're CFD. Okay, we're not a CFD2. It's something different. Other things have to do with AI, and we can discuss this later. But yeah, I guess those are the main things. But the very positive side, a lot of people, they want to use it, and that's great. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's becoming more and more every week, every month. And that would have been actually my follow-up question. Like, how does ToffeeX position itself in the evolving AI and physics AI landscape? Like, are you interested in doing some physics AI stuff? Do you call it physics AI? Do you maybe call it differently? And how much of AI is actually inside of ToffeeX?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, the core of ToffeeX is physics-based, physics-driven. ToffeeX is physics-driven. So essentially what what we have done, we solve the physics and the maths. That's very, very, very advanced problems, and we can't understand how to do that. And that's beautiful because if you think about it, if you have understood how the laws of physics work and how the mathematics that describe it works, and you can manipulate them, you have a very, very big advantage instead of flying blind into a vast data set. Okay, so that's our starting point. We get it. We know how it works. So Toffee does not use in its core AI. Okay, that's very important. However, we think that the future is kind of hybrid. So you will see companies using tools like Toffee, which are physics-driven, alongside AI-driven workflows. And if you combine the two, you're going to have, let's say, even more acceleration to design acceleration. Let's say for us, it's more on the design side. So let's say design acceleration, but in general, you will be able to design products faster and to bring products to market faster. So a massive time to market acceleration. And you will be able to increase your product innovation in a way that I think it's unthinkable. I don't even think we can grasp where we can get to. But in general, Toffee is not an AI company, although we might be using in the future some AI for some specific part of the product, such as turbulence, where maybe describing the physics is a little bit different. But I would say, if I have to use a word, is complementary. Complementary to legacy products, complementary to AI, new AI tools. And I would invite, I always say, when I work with people all over the world and tell me which one I should use. I don't think it's a good question. I think the good question is, how am I going to use all these new potential together? I think that's the right question.
Understood. I have a follow-up question regarding human creativity. Would you define ToffeeX as being a creative tool, or the word generative is inside, it's like generative AI, right? Like, do you think Toffee is creative in the sense of human creativity, or do you think ToffeeX is an augmentation of human creativity or the engineer's creativity?
My God, that's a very good question. Okay, here we're going a little bit more philosophical.
Yes.
That's an excellent question. You know what? First of all, I think this is important to mention. Toffee was created by a couple of Italian guys. Italians have a lot of creativity, and they have a lot of sense of beauty. Okay, now if you take this creativity, a sense of beauty, and you put it in a country like UK, and you work with Americans, what you're gonna do, and with let's say Anglo-Saxon people, what you're gonna do is to manage this creativity and this sense of beauty in a logical way. So you combine creativity, beauty, and logic, and that's what ToffeeX says: creativity, beauty, and logic. Now that there is because we follow the laws of nature, there is the creativity of nature that is embedded, let's say, in the software. So there is an element of creativity which is inside the software. Now, because it's a tool, though, for the engineers, this is going to, let's say, combine the creativity of nature with the creativity of the human. And when you put these two things together in a managed way, you can get really the next level of creativity, I guess. But one thing that is for sure is when we sit down, every time we develop the software, every time we do something new, and this is something, by the way, Marco is extremely strong on it. When we sit down, we think about the engineers. So of course we solve the physics, we solve the maths, we read all the most advanced things, but we think about the engineers. We sit down and we think, okay, how am I going to help the engineer to do better things and use their brain, augment their brain essentially. Now, Are we succeeding? I think yes. There are a few new things that we will be releasing that go in that direction. Are we sometimes seen as a black box? I think some people might think, I don't understand these shapes that you get, and that's absolutely fine. But our goal is to make sure that then you're going to use the software in a way that you will start to understand those shapes, and then you use your own brain to engage with the software, to engage with nature, and get to the next level. That's our idea. It takes a little bit of time, of course. I mean, it's not a simple way to do.
Yeah, I'm wondering when we talk a little bit about the future to maybe nearly wrap up the podcast. The engineer of the future, what crucial skills do you think they should have, especially when you think about the hiring process at ToffeeX, right? Because I feel that sometimes in the age of ChatGPT, a lot of people outsource their intelligence to a proxy, which is ChatGPT in this case. Do you feel that engineers will have the same phenomenon where basically they outsource the creative process, they become less creative, less nimble, maybe you would call it, by outsourcing the intelligence and the creative part to tools like ToffeeX?
That's an excellent question. And you know what? This is something I've been thinking about a lot, actually. I think a few things. So I'm going to lay them out. And of course, there is a debate on this, but I would say the very basic to me is that an engineer needs to know the basics of mathematics and physics. If you don't know the basics of mathematics and physics, and if a future engineer doesn't, you're not going to design anything good. There's no way. You're not going to be able to interact with your AI. You're not going to be able to interact with Toffee. There's no way. So that for sure, you need to have an education where you have some strong fundamentals. Now, once you have those fundamentals, what the new tools are doing, they are removing all the tedious manual work or all the tedious work that is sucking a lot of time out of you. So what the engineer will become is more of a system thinker that is using different tools to build more complex products. And what those tools are going to do, imagine this, you're an engineer maybe a few years back and you have to do meshing. Okay, just one thing, meshing. You spend days and days meshing, right? It's not a simple thing to do. Now imagine you can use your brain instead of spending a lot of time clicking everywhere. And this is just an example. There are so many. Imagine you're spending your time thinking about the broader engineering problem and then use those tools to solve complex problems instead of spending your time clicking on a mouse, right? So this is what I think the next generation of engineers will be, what they will need to be. They have stronger fundamentals of maths and physics, more system thinkers, and yeah, I guess that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that wraps it up perfectly. So basically, more like the orchestrator. I think the same way about this, Luca, that the engineer becomes less of the engineer itself being hands-on and meshing for hours and hours, but really using these intelligent tools, quote unquote, to actually orchestrate everything. Right, going from the CAD design to meshing to simulation and then to post-processing. I think the engineers will less likely do the hands-on work, but actually just using the different tools they have in the tool stack and make the best out of it. When it comes to the future of engineering, what is your anticipation for the next 3 to 5 years in terms of how engineering will evolve, especially when we think about ToffeeX? How will it shift the landscape of engineering?
So first of all, ToffeeX operates in markets that are they tend to think long term. So whilst for me or for a startup, 3 years is an eternity, right? Or for a person, 3 years is a long time. In markets like aerospace, defense, automotive, it's not a very long time scale, right? It's kind of reasonable time scale. What's going to happen in the next 3 or 5 years? I can see that those two tools like ToffeeX, and it's not just about ToffeeX. Actually, I'd like to highlight the fact that I would want to see tools like ToffeeX and all the new tools being successful. I don't think it's valuable to have just ToffeeX successful. I think I would want to see all these tools being successful. Even the ones that compete with us, although we have very small competitors, I want them to be successful, because the more successful they are, the more we will be successful. But what's going to happen is those tools will be adopted more and more. that will start to get embedded into engineering workflows. I can see this already happening in few big OEMs. We are at the stage where we're landing in some of those OEMs, and we are with time expanding. 3 to 5 years time, I would expect a good number of them to be acquainted with in our case, thermo-fluid generative design. And I would expect some of them, I wouldn't say all of them, but some of them to start bringing to market then some next generation of products that are designed through generative design. I think 5 years is a good, maybe it's a good time.
We'll have a follow-up podcast in 5 years and see if that's come true.
Yeah, you know when you do this prediction, he said 5 years ago, he said that. Okay, then you are in 5 years.
Exactly.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, exactly. I see that.
Yeah. Is there anything, before we wrap it up, Luca, is there anything that we might have missed discussing in this podcast? Anything that's close to your heart? Anything that we might have missed from your perspective when it comes to ToffeeX?
That is close to my heart. I think in general the technology and the company itself is very close to my heart. No, I would say we touched on a lot of things. I know many of those things were quite general, but I hope they're kind of useful. In general, what I always say is if anyone that is watching something wants to talk, feel free to send me a message. I'm always happy to talk, and also that's something actually that is very close to my heart, to learn from others. So if someone has got ideas, or they think we're doing something great, or they think we're doing something wrong, just send me a message and we talk. Explain to me why. Chances are they're right, and we can learn something and move forward. That's the idea. That's what I like to do with others, even if they kind of somewhat compete with us. They actually don't care. I want to move forward. That's something that's deep in my heart. Move forward.
Mm-hmm. I like the spirit. So it's good to have the dichotomy between having now the general podcast. We will talk more high level on your journey, right? About your journey, Luca. And then if we need a follow up, which is more academic, we can have one of your team members maybe coming on a podcast or deep dive session. So we have both, which I think is fine. All right, Luca, thank you very much. It was a really nice and I really enjoyed the conversation with you. And again, we'll see each other in 5 years to see if your predictions have come true. And then if you want to reach out to Luca, I'll put every relevant link to Toffee, his LinkedIn profile, and anything else that's relevant for you guys in the description, so you can check it out. So Luca, again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, everyone.